Three unconscious white men lay sprawled across the kitchen floor as federal marshals hunt for an escaped black woman doctor, hiding in plain sight. Ezra McKinnon hired Delilah Freeman only to cook meals and clean his Wyoming ranch house. Never, suspecting the lonely widower would fall in love with a brilliant physician fleeing fabricated murder charges from Texas. Now Delilah stands with a smoking rifle, facing a choice between running like a fugitive or fighting a corrupt legal system designed to destroy educated black women. She had come to Wyoming territory seeking more than refuge from persecution. Delilah Freeman had come to claim her right to heal. The rifle smoke hung in the kitchen like morning fog over broken dreams. Three white men lay unconscious on the wooden floor. Sheriff Clayton's badge caught the first light of dawn. Banker, Morrison's face pressed against cold planks. The federal marshal's star gleamed dull against his vest. Delilah Freeman stood over them. Her hands trembled around the rifle stock. Blood from a split knuckle stained the worn wood. She had never struck another human being before today. Ezra McKinnon touched his bleeding lip. His eyes found hers across the wreckage of his kitchen. 6 weeks ago he had hired her to cook his meals. Nothing more. A business arrangement between a lonely widower and a woman who needed work. The marshal's papers lay scattered like autumn leaves. Wanted for murder in Texas, Delilah Freeman. Reward offered, dead or alive. They came before sunrise, Ezra whispered. The horses outside nickered nervously. Their riders would not be riding anywhere soon. Delilah set the rifle against the kitchen table. Her breathing came quick and shallow. Sheriff Clayton stirred. His hand moved toward his holster. Delilah kicked the gun away. The metal skittered across the floor. "We need rope," she said. Ezra nodded. He had rope in the barn. Good, strong rope for cattle. For men who came to steal what did not belong to them. The kitchen window faced east. Dawn painted the Wyoming territory in shades of amber and rust. The same colors as dried blood. The same colors as autumn wheat before harvest. Delilah's hands moved with purpose now. She bound Sheriff Clayton's wrists behind his back. The knots were tight. Medical school had taught her anatomy. She knew where pressure points lived. "The charges are false," she said. Every word. Ezra found more rope. Banker Morrison groaned as the hemp circled his wrists. The marshal remained still. His breathing stayed steady. A bad sign or a good one? "Who are you really?" Ezra asked. The question hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. 6 weeks of shared meals. 6 weeks of careful distance. 6 weeks of pretending she was just a cook and nothing more. "Someone who should have told you the truth." The marshal's eyes opened. Cold blue eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. He tested his bonds. Found them secure. "You made a mistake, woman." Delilah met his gaze. "Which mistake was that?" "Thinking you could hide forever." The rope bit into his wrists as he struggled. Blood meant nothing to men like him. He had spilled enough of it. Ezra stepped closer. "What happened in Texas?" "I saved lives," Delilah said. "White doctors said I killed them." The truth tasted bitter as winter coffee. She had learned medicine from books stolen in darkness, practiced on bodies that other doctors abandoned, succeeded where trained physicians failed. Success had been her crime, excellence her sin. Sheriff Clayton spat blood onto the kitchen floor. "You people need to know your place." The words hit like a physical blow. Delilah absorbed them without flinching. She had heard worse, survived worse, endured worse. "My place is wherever I choose to stand." The marshal laughed. Harsh sound like crows fighting over carrion. "We'll see about that in federal court." "Will we?" Something in her voice made him stop laughing. Delilah Freeman possessed knowledge that frightened powerful men. Knowledge about healing, about corruption, about justice delayed and justice denied. The morning sun climbed higher. Light streamed through kitchen windows Sarah McKinnon had once cleaned. Sarah who died while her husband bought cattle. Sarah who might have lived if a skilled doctor had been present. Ezra looked at the bound men, then at Delilah. "What do we do now?" We choose. The choice lay before them like a crossroads. Run west and become fugitives. Stay east and face corrupted law. Fight north against impossible odds. Submit south to certain death. I won't run anymore, Delilah said. The marshal's smile returned. Then you'll hang. Maybe. Her calm unsettled him. Most people begged when facing federal charges. Most people broke when confronted with hanging ropes and jeering crowds. Delilah Freeman was not most people. She had been Dr. Delilah Freeman once, before Texas, before the lies, before 3 white doctors decided that a black woman's success threatened their failures. I have something they want, she told Ezra. What? Proof. The word landed heavy as a gravestone. Proof of corruption. Proof of lies. Proof that justice wore different faces for different people. The marshal's confidence wavered. You're bluffing. Am I? 6 weeks ago, Delilah had arrived in Wyoming territory carrying more than cooking skills. She carried documents, testimonials, evidence that powerful men preferred buried. The federal charges were fabricated. The warrant was forged. The marshal was bought and paid for by doctors who could not accept that knowledge belonged to anyone willing to learn it. There's a lawyer in Denver, she said. He's been expecting my letters. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of men breathing through broken noses and bleeding lips. Outside, Wyoming wind moved through prairie grass, like whispered secrets. Ezra understood now. This woman he had hired to cook his meals carried more danger than a loaded rifle, more hope than Sunday prayers, more courage than any person should need. The rope holds, he said. Delilah nodded. The rope would hold until help arrived. Help in the form of honest law, help in the form of federal judges who still believed in evidence over prejudice. She had gambled everything on the possibility that justice might exist somewhere in America, even for a black woman doctor who refused to apologize for her excellence. The gamble was not over yet. 6 weeks earlier, autumn had painted Wyoming territory in shades of dying. Ezra McKinnon's ranch house stood like a tombstone against the endless sky. Inside, whiskey bottles gathered dust beside untouched meals. Outside, cattle wandered sick and forgotten. Jake Morrison rode up through morning frost. His horse's breath clouded in cold air. He dismounted without invitation, walked straight to Ezra's door. You're killing yourself slow. Ezra looked up from his bottle. 3 days of beard shadowed his face. His clothes carried the smell of grief and neglect. Sarah's been gone 2 years, Jake continued. She wouldn't want this. The words hit like stones thrown at glass. Sarah's name still cut deep. Still, opened wounds that refused to heal properly. Hire help or lose everything. Jake's ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The ranch was failing. The cattle were dying. Ezra was drowning in debt and sorrow. That afternoon, Delilah Freeman walked up the dusty road. She carried a small satchel, wore a worn but clean dress, moved with quiet dignity despite obvious weariness. I'm looking for work. Her voice carried education, careful pronunciation that spoke of learning and practice, not what Ezra expected from a woman seeking domestic employment. Cooking and cleaning, she clarified. Room and board plus $2 weekly. Ezra studied her through bloodshot eyes. Traveling alone meant trouble or courage. Maybe both. Her hands showed calluses but also care, working hands that had known gentler tasks. You sleep in the barn. Understood. We keep proper distance, of course. The arrangement was business, nothing more. A lonely widower hiring help to save his failing ranch. A woman needing shelter and wages, simple as autumn rain. Delilah moved through the house like wind through wheat. Quiet, purposeful, respectful, of spaces that held too much memory. Sarah's belongings remained untouched. Delilah cleaned around them like a river flowing around stones. The kitchen came alive under her care. Real meals replaced whiskey and hardtack. The smell of bread baking drove out the scent of decay. Windows opened to let fresh air chase away the ghosts. Ezra found himself eating at regular hours, talking to another human voice, remembering what conversation felt like after months of silence. Where did you come from? Back east. Family? None that matter. Her answers were doors that opened just enough to show darkness beyond. Ezra recognized the technique. He used it himself when people asked about Sarah. Evenings brought lamplight to the kitchen. Delilah worked quietly while Ezra sat nearby. Sometimes she hummed, low melodies that reminded him of church hymns and childhood comfort. One night he found her reading. Sarah's medical books lay open on the kitchen table, complex diagrams of human anatomy, detailed descriptions of diseases and treatments. Interesting reading for a cook. Delilah looked up without guilt or surprise. I learned from the doctor's family. Back east. Learned what exactly? How bodies work, how they break, how they heal. Her knowledge seemed deeper than a servant's. Education. The way she explained circulation, discussed symptoms, used medical terms with comfortable familiarity. Ezra filed the observation away with other mysteries, the way she held herself, the careful speech, the hands that moved with practiced precision. Town gossip reached the ranch within days. Sheriff Clayton made social visits that felt like inspections. His eyes lingered on Delilah with uncomfortable interest. Unusual arrangement you have here. She cooks, I pay her. People talk. People always talk. But the visits continued. Questions disguised as friendly conversation. Suggestions, wrapped in community concern. The unspoken message remained clear. Banker Morrison arrived with loan documents and social pressure. Certain community standards affect creditworthiness. The threat was polite but unmistakable. Conform or face financial consequences. Ezra's debts made him vulnerable to such pressure. October brought early frost and Ezra's fever. He collapsed while checking cattle. Delilah found him unconscious in the barn. She moved with medical precision, checked his pulse, felt for temperature, assessed symptoms with practiced efficiency, not the fumbling of someone who had merely observed doctor's work. 3 days passed in fevered delirium. Delilah never left his side, applied cool cloths, monitored breathing, adjusted treatments based on changing symptoms. In his fever dreams, Ezra called for Sarah, reached for hands that had been buried 2 years. Delilah did not correct him. Let him hold her hand, let him find comfort in confusion. When the fever broke, Ezra woke to find Delilah crying in the kitchen. Quiet tears that spoke of losses too deep for words. I saved you, she whispered. But I couldn't save her. Couldn't save any of them. The weight of unspoken tragedies filled the space between them. Delilah carried more than cooking skills. She carried the burden of knowledge that had failed when it mattered most. Who did you lose? Everyone who trusted me to heal them. Her confession opened a door to deeper understanding. This woman possessed medical knowledge that went beyond observation. She had treated patients, lost patients, carried the weight of both success and failure. Recovery brought new awareness. Ezra watched her work with different eyes, saw the way she moved around his injuries, recognized the confidence of someone who understood human anatomy. You're not just a cook. No. What are you running from? People who think knowledge belongs only to them. The truth hung between them like morning mist, substantial but not quite solid, real but easy to dismiss if examined too closely. Sheriff Clayton's next visit brought more pointed questions. Mighty skilled nursing for hired help. She's good. At her job. Maybe too good. The implication poisoned the air. Competence became suspicion. Success became evidence of deception. November wind brought the sound of approaching horses. Official visitors who would not be satisfied with polite deflection, men with badges and warrants and questions that demanded answers. Delilah stood at the kitchen window, watched dust clouds rise from the road. Her hands gripped the windowsill until knuckles showed white. There's something you need to know about who I really am. But the hoofbeats arrived before the truth could follow. The riders dismounted in a cloud of November dust. Sheriff Clayton led them to the porch. Banker Morrison followed close behind. The third man wore a federal marshal's star and carried papers that rustled like dead leaves. Delilah stepped back from the kitchen window. Her confession would have to wait. Truth had its own timing. Always came when least convenient. Ezra McKinnon, the marshal called. We need to speak with your hired woman. Ezra met them at the door. His hand rested on the frame like he was holding up the house itself. What business do you have with her? Federal business. The marshal unfolded his papers. Official seals caught the afternoon light. Legal language that meant death or imprisonment. Maybe both. Delilah Freeman, wanted for medical malpractice, resulting in death. Multiple counts. The words hit like winter wind, cold and cutting and carrying the smell of distant storms. That's impossible. Is it? Ezra looked back toward the kitchen. Delilah stood in the doorway now, calm as still, water, ready as a drawn bow. May I see the charges? Her voice carried no fear, only the steady tone of someone who had faced worse things than corrupted law. The marshal handed over the papers. Delilah read them with the focus of someone who understood legal language, who had studied such documents before. These are lies. Federal court will decide that. Will it? Something in her tone made the marshal pause. Most wanted criminals begged or ran or broke down weeping. Delilah Freeman stood like a tree that had weathered too many storms to be moved by one more. I'll need to take you into custody. No. Ezra stepped between them. She's done nothing wrong. Step aside, McKinnon. This doesn't concern you. But it did concern him, had concerned him since the day she arrived, since she brought life back to his dying ranch, since she pulled him from fever dreams and made him remember what hope felt like. Tell me the truth, he said to Delilah. All of it. She looked at him across the space that separated them. 6 weeks of careful distance. 6 weeks of unspoken understanding. 6 weeks of building something neither had expected. I'm Dr. Delilah Freeman. The words fell like stones into still water, created ripples that spread in all directions. Trained at Oberlin College, licensed in Ohio, practiced medicine for 5 years before Texas. Sheriff Clayton laughed. A doctor? That's rich. Is it? Her question silenced him. There was nothing funny about truth spoken quietly by someone who had earned the right to speak it. In Texas, I treated patients other doctors had given up on, saved lives they couldn't save, used knowledge they refused to accept. The marshal stepped forward. And killed how many with your quack treatments? None. The charges say otherwise. The charges are fabricated by men who couldn't accept that I knew more than they did. Wind moved through the prairie grass, made sounds like whispered secrets, like buried truths trying to surface. They said I practiced without proper credentials, but I had credentials, better training than most frontier doctors, better results than any of them. Ezra understood now. The medical knowledge, the careful precision, the way she had saved his life with techniques no servant would know. What really happened? I refused to stop healing people. They needed someone who wouldn't give up on them, someone who would try when others wouldn't. The marshal grew impatient. Touching story. You're still under arrest. For what crime? Exactly? Delilah held up the papers. These charges reference patients I never treated. Deaths that occurred before I arrived in Texas. Testimony from doctors who never met me. Her calm analysis unsettled them. Most people faced with federal charges broke down, confessed to crimes they hadn't committed, begged for mercy from merciless men. You're saying federal marshals are lying? I'm saying someone paid them to lie. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. Dangerous, spreading, hard to contain once released. Ezra felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. He could step aside. Let them take her. Save himself and his failing ranch. Or he could choose something harder. She stays. The marshal's hand moved toward his weapon. You're interfering with federal law. I'm protecting an innocent woman. Innocent? Sheriff Clayton spat. She's been lying to you for weeks. About what? About being educated? About knowing medicine? About being better at her job than anyone expected? The questions hit like accusations, made the men uncomfortable, in ways they couldn't name. Stand down, McKinnon. No. Ezra moved closer to Delilah. Close enough to shield her. Close enough to share whatever consequences came next. I've lost everything that mattered to me, he said. My wife, my child, nearly lost my ranch. I won't lose her too. The confession surprised everyone, including himself. When had his feelings grown so deep? When had protection become love? You're making a mistake, the marshal warned. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Delilah touched his arm. Light pressure that said more than words could carry. She had not asked for protection, had not expected it, but she would not refuse it. There's more you should know, she said. What more? I didn't come to Wyoming just to hide. I came to fight. The marshal stepped back. Fight what? The system that says knowledge belongs only to certain people. That healing is a privilege reserved for the right color skin. Her words carried the weight of years, of studying by candlelight, of proving herself again and again to men who would never accept her proof. I have documentation, letters from patients I saved, testimony from honest doctors who witnessed my work. The marshal's confidence wavered. You're bluffing. Am I? She reached into her dress pocket, pulled out a folded letter. The paper was worn from handling, but the writing remained clear. Correspondence with a civil rights lawyer in Denver. He's been building a case, gathering evidence of corruption in Texas medical boards. The letter changed everything, made the fabricated charges look exactly like what they were. Desperate attempts to silence someone who threatened powerful interests. You planned this. I planned to survive, to practice medicine legally, to prove that justice exists somewhere in America. Sheriff Clayton reached for his gun. The movement was sudden, instinctive, born of fear rather than law. Ezra reacted faster, grabbed the sheriff's wrist. The two men struggled, fell against the porch railing. Delilah moved toward the kitchen, toward the rifle she kept for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. The marshal drew his weapon, pointed it at her retreating form. Stop right there. She stopped, turned, faced the barrel without flinching. You can shoot me, but you can't shoot the truth. It's already spreading. The standoff stretched like a held breath. 4 people balanced on the edge of violence. One wrong word would tip them over. Banker Morrison had remained silent until now. There's another way to handle this. All eyes turned to him. He held papers of his own, legal documents that smelled of money and influence. McKinnon's loans are due. His ranch can be seized for defaulting. Problem solved without federal charges. The threat was clear. Cooperate or lose everything. Hand over Delilah or face financial ruin. Ezra looked at the banker, then at Delilah, then at the setting sun that painted everything in shades of blood and gold. Take the ranch. The words came out steady, final, like a man who had weighed his options and found only one worth choosing. She's worth more than land. Ezra's declaration hung in the November air like a challenge to heaven itself. He would sacrifice his ranch for a woman he had known 6 weeks. The decision surprised no one more than himself. The marshal lowered his weapon. Confusion replaced confidence. Men who chose love over land were unpredictable, dangerous in ways that could not be measured. You're throwing away everything for her? Everything was already gone. Ezra spoke truth. The ranch had been dying since Sarah's death. The cattle sick, the land neglected. He had been a ghost haunting his own property. Delilah stepped forward. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. She had saved his life, pulled him from fever and despair, brought purpose back to empty days. The debt was more than money could measure. "There's another way," she said. The marshal straightened. "What way?" "I'll come with you willingly. No resistance. No more trouble." Delilah, no. But she was already moving toward the horses, accepting capture to save the man who had protected her. The symmetry was perfect and heartbreaking. "Wait." Sheriff Clayton's voice stopped her. He looked uncomfortable, like a man whose conscience was fighting his orders. "The federal charges? They're real? Real as corruption can make them." The marshal shot Clayton a warning look. Some truths were better left unspoken. Some questions better left unasked. "I've seen her work," Clayton continued. "She saved the Henderson boy when Doc Williams gave up, pulled him through fever that should have killed him. The confession changed the air, made everyone present reconsider what they thought they knew. She's been helping people quietly, without payment, without recognition." Banker Morrison shifted nervously. "That's not the point, isn't it?" Clayton looked at Delilah with new eyes, saw a healer instead of a criminal, a woman using knowledge to save lives instead of take them. "The charges are fabricated," he said finally. The marshal's hand moved to his weapon again. "You're out of line, Sheriff." "Am I? Or are you?" The question split the group like an axe through wood. 3 men from the same community, suddenly on different sides of justice. Delilah used the moment of confusion, slipped toward the kitchen, toward the rifle she knew waited there. The marshal noticed her movement, spun toward her. "I said stop." "Then stop me." She was already through the door, already reaching for the weapon, already making the choice that would bring them full circle. The rifle felt heavy in her hands, heavier than the medical instruments she had once carried. But sometimes healing required different tools. The marshal followed her inside, drew his weapon, found himself facing a woman who had nothing left to lose. "Put it down." "No." Behind him, Ezra entered with Sheriff Clayton. The banker remained outside, probably planning his retreat. "This doesn't have to end badly," the marshal said. "Doesn't it?" Delilah's voice carried the weight of every injustice she had faced, every patient she had saved only to be called a criminal, every night she had studied medicine by candlelight while others slept in comfort. "You came here to destroy me for the crime of being educated, for the sin of healing people who needed healing." The marshal's certainty wavered. "I'm following orders." "Whose orders?" "Federal orders. From federals paid by Texas doctors who couldn't accept losing patients to someone they considered beneath them." Her words hit like stones thrown at glass, created cracks in the marshal's resolve. Sheriff Clayton stepped forward. "She's right, I've seen the telegrams, the payments, the bribes." Quiet. No more quiet, no more lies. The sheriff's rebellion was complete now. Years of following corrupt orders had finally reached their limit. "The charges are false. The warrant is bought. The whole system is rotten." Delilah kept the rifle trained on the marshal. "What will you choose? Justice or money?" The question forced a decision, made neutrality impossible. The marshal looked around the kitchen, saw Sarah's medical book still open on the table, saw the evidence of knowledge being used to heal rather than harm. "I follow federal law." "Whose law?" "The law." But his voice lacked conviction now, sounded like a man repeating words he no longer believed. Outside, horses whinnied nervously. The banker was mounting up, preparing to leave before the situation deteriorated further. "He's running," Ezra observed. "Let him run." Delilah's focus never left the marshal. "You have a choice to make." "What choice?" "Between doing what's right and doing what's profitable." The choice was ancient, old as humanity itself. The eternal struggle between conscience and convenience. The marshal's hand trembled slightly. "I have my orders." "You have your conscience too." "Conscience doesn't pay wages." "No, but it lets you sleep at night." The standoff stretched like a held breath. 4 people balanced on the edge of violence. One wrong word would tip them over. Then Sheriff Clayton did something unexpected. He drew his own weapon, pointed it at the marshal. "Drop it." "What are you doing?" "My job. Protecting innocent people from corrupt law." The marshal found himself outnumbered, outgunned, abandoned by his allies. "This is treason. This is justice." The words came from Delilah, spoken with quiet certainty, with the authority of someone who had studied law as well as medicine. The marshal's resistance crumbled, his weapon lowered. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured bladder. "You're making a mistake. We're correcting one." 6 months later, spring returned to Wyoming territory. The legal battle had been won. The marshal's corruption exposed. The charges dismissed. Delilah Freeman became the first licensed black woman doctor in the territory. Her practice thrived. Her reputation grew. Justice had been served. She and Ezra married in a simple ceremony. No guests except Sheriff Clayton and his wife. No celebration except the quiet satisfaction of love recognized. The ranch recovered under their joint care. Cattle grew fat. Crops flourished. Life returned to land that had been dying. But happiness was fragile on the frontier, as fragile as the woman who now carried new life within her. Delilah sat in the kitchen, studying Sarah's medical books. Her hands rested on her growing belly. Tears streamed down her face. Ezra found her there. "What's wrong?" She looked up with eyes that held knowledge and terror in equal measure. "I'm pregnant, Ezra, and I know exactly what killed Sarah, what kills most women out here. I know how to prevent it, but..." She touched her belly, looked around at their primitive conditions, at the isolation that made medical emergencies deadly. Sometimes knowing isn't enough. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.